Hey, you cannot live in Putnam County without knowing that there have been many people who came before you. People who have given their lives, who have served our country. People who have fought for our freedom. Well, those people will be forgotten if not for people who are trying to locate them and tell their stories. Oh my God, what a show we have for you today. There is a woman who has been going around talking to many of these vets, asking them, what was your experience? And then putting them all together. My name is Vin Dacquino. Our guest today is Dorothy Campbell. Dorothy, let's talk writing. You have written a wonderful book called Forget Not, The Winter of Discontent. It is an incredible book about stories of our veterans. Where did all of this begin to you? What is your connection? Were you a veteran?
No, my husband was a Marine in the Korean War.
Ah, okay.
And I get the title from the fact that his motto in Scotland, Campbell, is forget not.
Ah.
And the Korean War was the forgotten war. So I'm trying to have people remember it.
So he had experiences in the war. Now, this is your husband here.
Yes.
And your husband, good-looking man, served in the Marines?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about his service in the Marines.
Well, actually, he started out in the Army at 15 in the National Guard.
Oh, wow.
Of course, his mother signed papers saying he was older. And then when the Korean War broke out, he says he'd rather go to war with the Marines.
So his big war was the Korean War.
Yes. They won him back in Vietnam because he was also in construction, but he barely made out of Korea.
Yeah, wow.
Because he was wounded 3 times.
Now, if I remember right, he served on the Intrepid, right? Right here in New York?
No, he didn't serve on it. He was on the construction of it when they turned it into a museum.
Oh, wow. So he helped turn it into a museum. Wow, interesting.
And then he gave me a tour of the ship before it was open to the public.
Now, tell me where the seed for this book came from. Where did you all of a sudden say, you know what, I'm doing a book?
Well, I've met so many people, and sadly to say, they're dying off.
Yeah, they are.
And in fact, last year I interviewed somebody who he was shot down over Hungary, and he was taken prisoner, and all of a sudden, through various incidents in the story, he was released into the hands of the Russians. And in the book it tells how he survived that ordeal with nothing to eat.
So one of the things you did was track down veterans and get their stories.
Right.
And then put them all together into this book. Now, did you pick any particular war, or does this represent?
No, in fact, if somebody's walking on the street with a cap on his head with Korea or World War II or whatever.
Excuse me.
I do. Even in the A&P, in the bank, everywhere.
That's wonderful. That's what a good writer does.
Well.
So you track them down and you say, my name is Dorothy Campbell. I'm writing a book about veterans. Are you willing to tell your story?
Right.
Did you ever get anyone say no?
A few do, because some of them don't want to live the experience over again.
I can understand that.
You know, because they went through a lot.
Yep.
And one time I saw a license plate, POW, and I waited outside the building for him to come out, and he gave me his story.
Wow, and he told you about can you tell me just roughly, what was his story? He was a POW?
He was a POW.
In what war?
In World War II.
World War II, wow.
And they were finally liberated, of course, and Eisenhower came to his camp and he said, oh, you men are going to get fed well now. They weren't.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So, overall, is every story a sad story?
No, by all means not, because a lot of people appreciate the experience, and a lot of people get an education out of the service, too, because they get the GI Bill through it. And for instance, my nephew, he had 2 years of college and he got into the military, and they said, well, you're a smart boy. They give him tests, you know. And he said, we'll let you finish your education in the service, and he became a nuclear engineer in the submarines.
Wow.
And then when he put his time in, he came out, and now he's got a job down a nuclear power plant in Georgia.
Wow. Wow. So the service can change your life
Of
in
course.
positive ways. What about your husband? Did it change his life in positive ways? Did you meet him after?
After, yes.
Wow.
Well, he was a quiet type, and I had to draw things out of him, but once we were married, it was endless conversation, and that's why I started writing this.
Oh, so he was still alive. He's passed.
He's passed now, yes.
But you started this when he was still alive.
No, it was all in my head, of course. You know, the
Ah,
memories were
okay.
there, so I started to write them out.
Now, since this show is called Let's Talk Writing, you are a member of the Mayapack Writers Workshop.
Your group.
And you've been, yep, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to hear pieces of this as part of that. Tell me about your writing style. Do you write in the middle of the night? Do you
Oh,
write
yes.
in the middle of the day?
2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Ah, you're a night writer, like me.
Because the phone isn't ringing then.
That's right. That's why I love it.
And
Phone's not ringing.
I do my research during the day, you know, at the library, because I'm not on the internet. So I bring all these papers home and I try to make a story out of it.
That's another question. Now, you have a guy like this POW who tells you his story, and then do you go back it up? I mean, do you go look up?
No,
or
I take it at his word, and I put them in the individual stories in the back of the book, and it's all in alphabetical order, so then when people go back to the book to look for their story, they find it. And it leads to other stories. Because, for instance, one man admitted to me that he couldn't read or write. He had to have his neighbor fill out the story for him.
Wow.
And then he said at the bottom of his letter, if anybody knows me, contact me.
Wow. Wow. Now, so do you use a tape recorder? Do you,
No, I
just
take shorthand.
shorthand. Wow. So they tell you the story. Now, do you sit with these people? Have a cup of coffee or
Sometimes.
something? Or?
Well, last month I went to a nursing home where some woman was from the Holocaust.
Wow.
And I took her story down, albeit my second book.
Wow. So second book. So there's another book coming,
Yes,
Warpath.
because there's so much that I didn't cover in the first one.
Yeah.
But it's basically the same premise.
Now, how many pages is this book?
Well, it's over 400.
Over 400 pages. And it's all individual stories.
No, maybe a third of it is individual stories. Others are campaigns through the wars.
Oh, okay.
So
So
I
you describe
researched that.
about the wars. Now, is this organized by war?
Time frame, yeah.
Yep.
Sequential.
So you don't go back to the Revolutionary
Yeah,
War?
well, I do
You do
in
with
the
some.
second one.
In the second book. So in this one, where does it begin?
Well, it begins with my husband as a plumber,
Okay.
you know, and then it
And
goes.
the plumber working on the Intrepid.
No, his whole service in the city, and then into the military, and then his connection with Marshal Ney of France, who was his great uncle under Napoleon.
Wow.
And I was in Versailles one time, and I happened to see in this hall of mirrors all the marshals, and he looked just like my husband's brother.
Wow. Wow. Is there a particular story that stands out, a story that you say, whoa?
Well, a good friend of mine, Harvey Meyer, which many people know up here, he was a Marine on Iwo Jima. He was special.
Wow.
And his story is here. He said the man next to him was vaporized.
What happened?
Vaporized.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. Phew. Let's see. And he was able to tell you this story?
Yes.
And
Well, I visited him 2 years ago in the nursing home in Montrose, where he spent his last days, because he was 93 when he passed away.
and he's passed away since.
Yeah, because he was 27 when he joined the Marine Corps.
Wow.
So he was an old man at the time.
Yeah.
on
Holy
Iwo.
cow. Wow. So he joined the war at 27.
Yeah.
So the details, I mean, he gave you all these details of what
Yes.
actually happened.
And he gave me a picture of him in Manhattan on the Lower East Side by the elevated subway. That's in there.
Wow. Speaking of pictures, you have photographs in this book.
Oh, by all means, and most of them are supplied by the men themselves.
Wow. This picture here was supplied by,
Yes, that's Marines going up one of the hills in Korea.
wow, that's a beautiful shot. That's, wow.
And this one is from the Chosin Reservoir campaign.
Oh, Korea, yeah, 1950. Wow, that's a great shot, too.
And they were all smiling, believe it or not.
Yeah, I see that. I don't know how they're smiling. Looks awful.
It might have been on the way up, maybe not on the way back.
Yeah, yeah. So, Dorothy, what's your point? What are you trying to do?
The point is to remember their experiences.
That's right. And have them, I mean, you've heard me say this in the workshop. You heard me say it during one of the other shows. If we do not help our children of today to understand their past, we are going to steal from them a little bit of their tomorrow. War is going to keep happening, Dorothy, over and over again.
That's right.
Their brothers, their fathers, their grandfathers, their children are going to be involved in war. We need to learn from our experiences. And some of that learning is painful. Talk to me about the pain that some of these people shared with you, Dorothy.
Well, in my second book, I go into the Wounded Warrior campaign, which is helping these guys who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan who are suffer with PTSD, you know, the mental illness from post-traumatic stress.
Wow.
And I don't use their last names because of
some of them are
privacy
still
reasons.
alive and
exactly.
well, or as well as they can
But
be.
in researching my first book, I found out that they can actually determine post-traumatic stress from brainwave patterns now.
Wow. Wow. We've come a long way, haven't we?
A long way and not very far.
But not long enough. Now, have you visited any of these veteran hospitals?
Well, of course, my husband was a patient at Castle Point, and he was also a patient down at 23rd Street in Manhattan, where he had double heart surgery, you know, valve operations.
So he had conditions.
He had shrapnel in his leg left over from the war because they couldn't take it out because they said it would do more damage taking it out.
Wow. So they left the shrapnel right in his leg. Can you tell me a little bit about that story? How did he get that shrapnel in his leg? Do you?
Well, he was on the front lines. He was in a forward position, and of course they were overrun, and he laid in the ditch for 3 days.
Wow.
Surrounded by the enemy.
Wow.
And would just keep shooting anytime anybody popped over the ridge, and they were falling on top of him.
Oh my
and he had to lay there until somebody
So he
came
had
back.
to lay in that ditch with these dead bodies all around him, with shrapnel in his leg, bleeding.
Yeah.
Wow. And I imagine that stays
Oh, yes.
with you a long time. And he was able to share some of that pain and experience with you.
Yeah.
And some of that you've captured for this book.
But this is what they go through when they go to, you know, mental clinics. They talk it out. That's the only way. It's got to release it like a bottle, you know.
Yep, yep. Otherwise, they keep it inside.
Bottling up is no good.
And, I mean, I hear of these soldiers who wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. Was that an experience your husband had as well?
Well, his sister told me when I was writing this book, and I hadn't known it until then, that one night, you know, when he was still at home, she went downstairs and he was in the living room in the dark crying.
Yeah. Wow. And he served, what, 4 years?
3.
3 years. And it's amazing how those 3 years affect the whole rest of your life. You know, I've heard people, I actually have heard people say, oh, you know, we have to pay for these veterans all the rest of their lives, but they gave their lives during those 3 years.
They gave their youth, too.
They gave their youth. Yep, that's well said. That's right. You give your youth. You give a piece of you to do that. And it's not an easy thing to do.
But somebody has to do it.
Somebody has to do it. You're right.
And now the women are doing it, too.
Yeah, and that's pretty scary. You know, I mean, if for nothing else, it doubles the number of Americans risking their lives.
Well, we don't have a draft, so they have a volunteer army, you know. So they need the women now.
Yeah.
I have a chapter of women in the new book, too.
Oh, so the new book will have a chapter?
Oh, yes.
Now, in this book here, there are no women infantry in this book. And forget
well,
not, because it's,
I do cover Sybil Luddington in a way, because she was part of the military experience.
Yeah, she was.
Florence Nightingale.
Yeah. See, that's something that I try to impress on students. You know, I go to a number of schools, talk to the students, and I try to tell them that war is a family affair. One of the comments in one of the books was that Sybil Ludington's ride was at a time that was not a significant battle of the Revolutionary War. Every single battle where an American dies or loses part of his youth or life is a significant battle.
Sure.
And it's crucial that we give credit where credit is due. Sybil Ludington, that night, went on that horse for 40 miles in the pouring rain. There were guys out there who hated her father, hated him. There was a reward on his head. If they knew that that was his daughter, that night on that horse, she would have been raped or killed in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. And not just by the British, but by cowboys, skinners. In order to live your life during times of war, don't we know this? Didn't 9/11, 9/11, didn't that show us something? That all Americans are at war
Sure.
when America is at war. So I think what you've done here is a wonderful thing. You've given us an opportunity to hear the stories of people who have given part of themselves for the freedom of our country. I know you've heard me say this, and I've heard it 100 times. I will repeat it 1,000 times. Freedom is never free. Never free. It always comes at some cost. This book weighs some of those costs. Again, a particular story that just kind of broke your heart a little bit.
They all did.
They all did. They all did. And a lot of these people were willing to tell you what they experienced. People who are now up in their years. That always amazes me. We're talking about people who fought 60 years ago.
They're in the 90s.
And they're in their 90s, and they're still carrying that. They're carrying that like baggage.
And they're dying off at $2,500 a day.
Yep. Yep. And some of those who lost the limbs, people like your husband walked around with shrapnel in his leg. Those years at war last a lifetime. So, Dorothy, you're putting all these stories together, and you're writing in the middle of the night. You're trying to get these together. Was there any point where you said, I can't do this?
No, because it's so interesting.
Yeah, a fascinating story that had to be told. And you went and got some of these people off the street. You went into homes.
And I'm gone to Marine reunions, of course.
Wow, yeah. And how about VFWs?
Oh, yes. I'm a member there, too.
You're a member of the VFW, so you go there and share some of these war stories.
Well, you know, as I said, some people don't want to talk about it.
Right.
But then I'll say, well, here's my form, fill it out and mail it back to me. This way they do it on their own time.
And some of them do.
Yes.
Now, you gather all of these stories, and then were there any stories where you sat and said, this one's not going to make it into the book, I don't have enough information? Or
one did, because I thought he was putting on an act.
Okay, so it sounded,
Phony.
didn't sound true to you.
No.
So you didn't do it?
No.
Okay. Okay, so you...
But it's mostly in their language. I mean, it can be rough at times, too.
Yeah. I know that some of the language, I know one of the things you said to me is, what about vulgarity on this show? Because if I read any of this, some of this is going to get us into trouble.
Especially if you read what Patton said.
Yeah, these are guys.
Of course, they're in the trenches, you know.
Guys from the trenches. You know, any officers?
Oh, yes, colonels, yeah.
Yeah, colonels. You have stories of colonels in here too. That must be difficult.
But I try not to play up the rank. I try to treat them all alike.
But there's something about rank.
Oh yeah.
I mean, these are guys who have an experience of not only what's personally happening to them, but what's happening to the people who are under them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that would haunt me. That would frighten me to know that when I make a decision, it could be a decision of life or death for my men.
Well, I sent a copy of the book to West Point for their library, and, maybe they'll learn from it.
Yeah. Do we ever learn from war, Dorothy?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Because we do it over and over and over again through the ages. And man after man, woman after woman dies. Now, men and women are out there dying. They're dying for a peace that's so elusive, so difficult to get our hands on. Will we ever be at peace?
Well, I bring that in at the end of my book, and I have a poem about that.
Well, can you share that poem?
I don't know if I can find it now, but it's short.
And it's a poem about
Peace.
peace.
It's elusive.
Yeah. Oh, it sure is elusive.
Here it is.
Okay.
Peace, that elusive dream, like gossamer on the wind. It hovers briefly, then passes on, just out of the reach of our grasping hands. Our leaders vie for power, while the minion toil in futile pursuit. We are distracted by the enemy. Peace lies within. If it is not there, then it is nowhere.
My father-in-law was a vet. He was an incredible man. Incredible man. And he tried to tell his story so many times. And many times I heard him telling his story to people who were looking off in the distance, who cut him off right in the middle of the story and walked away.
Did you listen to him?
I did. I did because I felt that that was my part.
He wanted to tell it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you're saying in this book and here is that they did their role. We need to do our role in listening to these stories.
Give them support.
Yeah, and they have to get some of it out. Bad memories sit inside of us like old garbage. And pretty soon they begin to stink. And unless you take out the garbage, it's going to stay inside.
You got to
It
put
weighs
some
on your
air
heart.
on it.
Yeah, it weighs on your heart, it weighs on your soul. Someone needs to hear those stories. Now, I give you a lot of credit for not only listening to them, but putting it into a bound form for the rest of us to see. So, would I be safe in saying that one of the things we need to do is not only read your book, but listen to a vet?
By all means.
And try to make ourselves available so that they have a chance to take out the garbage?
And show your appreciation.
Yeah.
Just say you did a good job, thanks.
Yeah. Just to know that it wasn't in vain. You know, I grew up in the Vietnam era, and I watched some of those vets come home. My friends.
And they were spit
And
upon.
I saw them be unappreciated.
Yeah.
And I saw people saying to them, well, you never should have been there in the first place. Really? So I think it's important that we give an ear. I think it's important that we don't let those stories die with our vets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think this is a good thing. Now, I'm dying to ask you, Dorothy, why do I have a gun on my desk?
Well, in case you need it, but
Yeah. This is
A
part
flint-
of your next book.
the second one, yeah. This is a flintlock.
Tell me a little bit about that. We don't have a whole lot of time, but tell me about this new book you're about to do.
Well, it's a sequel to the first. It's more war stories. That which I couldn't put in the first one is in the next one. And I got this gun rifle up in Cape Cod. I was in this Elks Lodge, and they had them all up on the wall.
Wow.
And I said to the man, is there an antique shop around here where I can purchase one? He said, you want one? Here. And he gave it to me.
Oh, my God. What a find. Oh, my God. So this represents which war?
The Revolution.
The Revolution. And this new book is going to cover the Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to do things in this new book that you didn't do in the first book.
Right. And the Civil War.
You're going to cover the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. You're going to get some women in this one.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to talk about the role of women in modern day war.
Right.
Who are you interviewing? You doing the same thing?
Whoever I can run across.
Right. Have you interviewed any female soldiers yet?
Well,
working on it?
actually, there's a little story about this woman. Her name was Bernhardt. She was in Florida. I got this story from my sister-in-law who had a newspaper clipping. And women pilots used to fly planes back and forth across the states to deliver them on either the West Coast or the East Coast. And her story is in the book, Bernhardt.
Wow. So.
And she's in her 90s now.
So you're going to keep on keeping on. You're going to keep writing. Now, I know you do some poetry. This must be so difficult to get 400 pages in there.
No, I'm a very fast typist.
Oh, is that right? Yes. And you say you worked in shorthand too.
Yes.
You take the notes in shorthand. Do you use computer?
Oh, yes, you have to.
Yeah, yeah. And
I
people
went
send
down,
you emails.
I went down to the Historical Society and got this story on Joe Grace. And I took it all in shorthand and then went home and typed it up.
Wow.
Because he was also in his 90s.
Well, Dorothy, again, I can't say it enough. What you do is essential. You're helping to preserve our past. You're helping to let us remember that people have given a great deal of themselves for the freedom we enjoy. And we need to listen to their stories. We need to know that what they did was important. Whether we agree or disagree with war, there are people who gave of themselves.
Whether you agree or disagree with the politics of it, too.
That's right. Whether you agree or disagree with the politics, people have stories to tell, and you help tell them. Today, you have been part of history. You need to read the stories of the people who gave for your freedom. Dorothy, I can't thank you enough for being with us.
Thank you.
Proud to have you here. Keep on keeping on. Stay with us. Listen to our authors. Listen to your heart. Thank you for being with us.